The morning sky over Seoul burned orange as the massive ships hung in the air like sleeping giants. Hak Jin pressed his back against the broken wall of what used to be a coffee shop and watched the blue creatures move through the streets below. 3 months had passed since they came from the stars, and everything changed forever. The aliens called themselves Corvani, and they stood 9 feet tall with skin like blue glass. Their bodies had 4 arms that moved like water and eyes that glowed white in the darkness. When they first arrived, they sent messages to every screen on Earth telling humans to surrender or die. Most governments tried to fight, but the alien weapons turned tanks into melting metal, and jets fell from the sky like broken birds. Hak Jin had been a police officer before the invasion, but now he led a group of 20 survivors who lived in the subway tunnels beneath the ruined city. Every day they went out to find food and medicine while avoiding the Corvani patrols. The aliens had put energy barriers around all the major cities, and anyone who tried to leave disappeared forever. Today, Hak Jin needed to reach the old university where Dr. So-min was hiding. The scientist had sent a message through the underground network saying she had discovered something important about the alien technology. Getting there meant crossing 6 blocks of open street where the Corvani flying machines watched everything that moved. He waited until the patrol passed, then ran across the empty road toward a burned car. The Corvani had strange habits that humans were slowly learning to use. They moved in patterns and checked the same places at the same times every day. Their minds seemed to work like machines following rules instead of thinking for themselves. Behind him came Ji-woo, who had been a soldier before the war started. She carried a rifle that fired alien energy bolts after Taeho, the young engineer, figured out how to make human weapons use Corvani power cells. The technology was beyond anything humans had ever seen, but Taeho said it worked on principles that reminded him of music. The university lay in ruins with half the buildings collapsed from the first day of fighting. Dr. So-min had made her laboratory in the basement of the physics building where the thick walls blocked the alien scanners. When Hak Jin and Ji-woo reached the hidden entrance, they found her working with 3 other scientists around tables covered with pieces of broken alien equipment. So-min looked up from a device that hummed with blue light, and her eyes were bright with excitement. She had been studying the Corvani technology for weeks and finally understood why it seemed so different from human machines. The aliens built everything to work together in harmony like instruments in an orchestra, while humans made each piece to fight and compete with all the others. The alien devices used sound waves and vibrations to create their energy fields and weapons. So-min had discovered that certain frequencies could disrupt their technology completely. She showed them a small, metal box that played high-pitched sounds when activated. When she turned it on near a piece of Corvani equipment, the alien device stopped working and its lights went dark. Taeho explained that he had been experimenting with human music and found that some songs could interfere with alien communications. The Corvani seemed to hear all sounds as either harmony or chaos, and human music confused their systems because it contained both at the same time. A simple rock song could make their computers crash, while classical music made their weapons overheat. The discovery gave them their first real hope since the invasion began, but using it meant getting close enough to alien installations to place the disruption devices. Ji-woo volunteered to lead the first mission while Hak Jin organized the escape routes. They would target a small Corvani outpost that controlled the energy barrier around the eastern district. That night they moved through the subway tunnels toward their target. The group included 12 fighters armed with modified human weapons, and 3 of So-min's sound devices. The alien outpost sat on top of a 20-story building that had been a bank before the war. Blue lights pulsed along its walls, and flying machines circled overhead like metal insects. The Corvani inside followed their usual patterns, checking their instruments and communicating in sounds that hurt human ears. They never expected attacks from below because their own species had never learned to think like predators. Every Corvani world had evolved cooperation instead of competition, so they could not understand creatures who turned conflict into strength. Taeho had modified the building's old sound system to broadcast his disruption frequency throughout the structure. When he activated it, the alien technology began failing one system at a time. The Corvani inside made strange crying sounds as their equipment stopped working, and their communications went silent. Ji-woo led the assault team up the stairwell while the aliens stumbled around in confusion. Without their technology, the Corvani were still dangerous, but they moved slowly and could not coordinate their defense. The humans fought like they had learned in 100 wars, while the aliens tried to follow rules that no longer applied. The battle lasted only minutes before the surviving Corvani retreated to their flying machines and escaped into the night sky. For the first time since the invasion, humans had won a real victory against the aliens and captured an intact outpost with all its equipment and information. So-Min and her team spent the next week studying everything they found while Hak-Jin organized raids on other small installations. Each victory taught them more about Corvani technology and revealed new weaknesses to exploit. The aliens were powerful, but they thought in straight lines while humans had learned to think around corners. Word of their success spread through the underground networks to resistance groups in other cities. In Tokyo, a hacker named Bo-Ra had learned to break into alien computer systems using modified gaming equipment. In New York, a former pilot called Dong Min was building human aircraft that used captured Corvani engines. In London, musicians led by Yu Jin were broadcasting disruption frequencies through radio stations that the aliens could not locate or destroy. The Corvani had expected to conquer Earth in a matter of days by following the same methods they used on dozens of other worlds. Their scouts had watched human warfare and dismissed it as primitive because humans fought each other instead of working together. They saw the constant conflicts and environmental damage as proof that humans were too chaotic and destructive to pose any real threat. But the aliens had misunderstood what they were seeing. Human warfare was not a weakness but a training ground that had been preparing the species for this moment across thousands of years. Every battle had taught lessons about adaptation and survival that no peaceful civilization could learn. Every conflict had selected for traits that made humans dangerous when truly threatened. The Corvani technology was superior, but it was designed by minds that had never faced real opposition. Their weapons and defenses assumed enemies who followed predictable patterns and fought according to logical rules. They had no experience dealing with creatures who turned disadvantages into advantages and made weapons from garbages. The 4th month of occupation began. The aliens started changing their patrol patterns and increasing security around their installations. Their communications carried new tones that sounded like worry or confusion to human ears. The easy conquest they had planned was becoming a grinding war against an enemy. They did not understand. Hak-Jin stood on the roof of their captured outpost and looked out over the city where fires burned in the distance and alien ships moved through the sky like nervous birds. The war was far from over, but something had changed in those first successful raids. Humans had learned they could fight back and win. The real battle was just beginning. 6 months after the first Corvani ships darkened Earth's skies, the war had become something neither species expected. Dr. So-Min walked through her expanded laboratory where dozens of scientists worked with alien technology that now filled 3 underground levels. The equipment hummed and sparked as human minds pushed it beyond its original design. The breakthrough had come when Yunji, the brilliant physicist, realized that Corvani technology was built like a living organism, with each part depending on all the others. Human technology was different because each piece was designed to work independently and fight for resources. When humans started mixing the two approaches, the results surprised everyone, including the aliens. Dae-Sung sat at a workstation where screens showed alien communication networks that he had learned to infiltrate. The young computer specialist had discovered that Corvani minds worked like a giant chorus where every voice sang the same song. They shared thoughts and emotions across their entire species, which made them powerful when they agreed, but helpless when they felt conflict. The alien communication system was beautiful but fragile because it had evolved on worlds where cooperation was the only survival strategy. No Corvani had ever needed to hide their thoughts or deceive their companions, so they had no defenses against minds that had been shaped by millions of years of competition. And warfare captain Kyung-ho planned his next mission while studying maps of the alien command ship that orbited above the city. The former Special Forces officer had led 15 successful raids on Corvani installations, and each victory taught his team new ways to use captured alien equipment. The weapons were designed for creatures with 4 arms and different nervous systems, but human engineers were learning to modify everything. The aliens had made their first mistake by assuming that primitive technology meant primitive thinking. Their second mistake was believing that human chaos was a weakness instead of a strength. Every Corvani attack followed patterns that could be predicted, while human tactics changed with every battle because each human commander thought differently. Bo-Ra typed commands into a modified gaming computer that was connected to 3 alien communication devices through cables that should not have worked according to any known science. The young hacker had found that Corvani computer systems were vulnerable to the same kind of chaos that human music created in their weapons. A simple computer virus written in human code could crash entire alien networks. Her latest creation was spreading through Corvani systems like a digital disease that made their computers play human rock music instead of processing data. The aliens could fix the problem, but only by shutting down their networks, which left them blind and deaf. While human forces attacked their positions, Han Solo flew his modified fighter jet through the clouds above the city, while alien aircraft tried to intercept him using tactics that worked perfectly against other Corvani, but failed completely against human unpredictability. The former Air Force pilot had learned to fly in patterns that hurt his own aircraft, but confused alien targeting systems that expected rational behavior. The Corvani flew their ships like they lived their lives in perfect harmony with natural laws and mathematical precision. Han Solo flew like humans had always lived, by breaking rules and surviving through luck and determination. His plane should have been destroyed a dozen times, but the aliens could not predict moves that made no logical sense. Below him, Yunji led a combined force of soldiers and civilians against a Corvani supply depot that was protected by energy shields and automated weapons. The Marine sergeant had organized her assault like a human riot instead of a military operation, because the alien defenses were programmed to stop coordinated attacks, not chaotic mobs. Her fighters used weapons built from human and alien technology, mixed together in ways that should have been impossible. Tejo had shown them how to combine human explosives with Corvani energy cells to create bombs that could tear through alien armor, while their own weapons bounced off human steel and concrete. The aliens inside the depot tried to coordinate their defense through their shared communication network, but Dai Sung had infected their system with a virus that made every message sound like human laughter. The Corvani could not function when their perfect harmony was replaced by the chaos of human emotion. The battle ended with alien survivors fleeing into the sky, while humans looted their advanced equipment and studied their tactics. Each victory revealed new weaknesses in Corvani thinking and new ways to exploit their dependence on order and predictability. The aliens were learning to fear an enemy that fought without rules. Kehoe organized the urban warfare that turned every human city into a maze of death for occupying forces. The former street fighter knew every alley and rooftop in his district, and had taught his followers to attack like a pack of wild animals instead of a military unit. The Corvani could not understand enemies who appeared from nowhere and vanished before they could respond. The aliens had expected to face human governments and armies that followed the same basic principles as their own civilization. Instead, they found millions of small groups that fought independently, using tactics that changed faster than alien intelligence could analyze them. Every human leader thought differently, and every battle was a new puzzle that had to be solved from the beginning. Dong Min worked in a hidden factory where humans were building weapons that combined the best of both technologies. The brilliant engineer had learned to make Corvani energy systems work with human mechanical designs, creating machines that were more effective than anything either species had built alone. His latest creation was a tank that could phase through solid matter while firing shells that exploded into pure energy. The aliens had another problem beyond human unpredictability, and that was human creativity. Corvani technology was perfect for its intended purpose, but it could not adapt to new situations. Human technology was crude but flexible, and when the two were combined, the results were beyond anything the aliens had encountered in their conquest of 47 worlds. Yujin broadcast disruption frequencies from hidden radio stations that moved every few hours to avoid alien detection. The young communications expert had turned human music into a weapon that could shut down Corvani equipment from miles away. Her latest transmission included a symphony written specifically to drive alien computers insane. The Corvani had tried to jam human radio signals, but their technology was designed to block organized communications, not the chaos of human broadcasting. Every human station played different music and transmitted different messages, creating a wall of noise that the aliens could not penetrate or understand. In their command ships orbiting Earth, the Corvani High Command studied reports that made no since according to everything they knew about warfare and technology, their forces were being defeated by creatures who used inferior weapons and followed no logical strategy. The humans seemed to violate the basic laws of physics and military science with every battle. The aliens had conquered civilizations that were older and more advanced than humanity. But all of those species had evolved along similar paths toward cooperation and harmony. They had never faced an enemy that had been shaped by constant conflict and competition into something that thrived on chaos and uncertainty. Commander Zhexhai read the latest intelligence reports, while his forearms trembled with confusion and growing fear. The humans were not just adapting to Corvani technology, they were improving it in ways that should have been impossible. Their weapons were becoming more effective while their tactics grew more unpredictable with every passing day. The original invasion plan had called for total human surrender within 1 week, followed by peaceful integration into the Corvani Empire. 6 months later, the aliens controlled less territory than they had after the first day, and their losses were mounting while human resistance grew stronger. Something was very wrong with their understanding of this species. The worst part was that humans seemed to enjoy the conflict in ways that disturbed every Corvani who encountered them. The aliens had evolved beyond violence and saw warfare as an unfortunate necessity that should be ended as quickly as possible. Humans treated each battle like a game and celebrated their victories with loud music and primitive rituals. Hak Jin stood in the control room of their captured command center and watched displays that showed human forces advancing across the planet. In 6 months, they had grown from scattered survivors hiding in ruins to an organized resistance that was pushing back against the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The screen showed battles raging in every major city where humans used captured alien technology alongside weapons made from scrap metal and electronic components. The combination should not have worked, but human engineers seemed to delight in making the impossible function through pure determination and creative thinking. So Min had discovered that the key to understanding Corvani technology was not to copy it perfectly, but to break it in useful ways. Human machines worked by controlled destruction and chaos, while alien devices required perfect harmony. When the two approaches were combined, the results were weapons and tools that neither species could have imagined alone. The war was far from over, but the balance of power was shifting, as humans learned to fight an enemy that had never learned to fight back. 1 year after the Corvani arrived, expecting an easy conquest, they found themselves trapped on a world that had become their nightmare. The blue, crystalline beings who had once moved through human cities like gods now huddled in their remaining strongholds, while the creatures they had dismissed as primitive hunted them through streets that ran red with alien blood. Yunji crouched behind the twisted remains of a Corvani transport and signaled to her squad of 12 fighters who carried weapons that should not exist according to the laws of physics that governed the rest of the galaxy. The Marine sergeant had learned to think like her enemy in order to destroy them more efficiently, and what she had discovered filled her with a cold satisfaction. The aliens were dying not from superior firepower, but from something far worse. They were dying from despair. Their perfect minds could not adapt to a reality where their technology failed, and their strategies crumbled against enemies who fought like rabid animals instead of rational beings. Every battle broke a little more of their collective spirit. Her target was a Corvani communication hub that coordinated alien forces across the entire continent. The building had once been a human shopping mall, but the aliens had filled it with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy and sang in harmonies that made human ears bleed. Destroying it would blind their enemy for days, while human forces, advanced Dongmen, had given her squad weapons that fired bullets made from compressed human music that exploded into sonic chaos when they hit alien armor. The ammunition was created by recording rock concerts and translating the sound waves into physical projectiles that carried human emotion as well as kinetic energy. Each shot delivered not just destruction, but the raw fury of a species that refused to surrender. The aliens inside the mall had arranged their defenses according to mathematical principles that assumed their enemies would attack using logic and coordination. Instead, Yunji had her people surround the building and start playing different music from speakers placed at random intervals around the perimeter. The cacophony shattered Corvani concentration and made their defensive systems malfunction when the assault began. It was like watching a nature documentary about predators hunting prey that had never learned to run. The Corvani tried to form defensive lines and coordinate their response, but human fighters appeared from impossible angles using tactics that violated every principle of warfare. That the aliens understood Kehoe emerged from a storm drain directly beneath the alien command center and began killing with weapons that had been forged in the ruins of human civilization. The former street fighter moved like water through the crystalline corridors, while Corvani warriors fell around him, unable to predict where the next attack would come from. The aliens had evolved on worlds where violence was rare and quick, decisive actions ended conflicts before they could escalate. They had no experience fighting creatures who treated warfare as an art form that had been perfected through millions of years of practice. Every human movement was informed by genetic memories of countless battles fought by ancestors who had survived by being more vicious than their enemies. Yujin coordinated the electronic assault from her mobile command vehicle that stayed ahead of alien pursuit by never following the same route twice. The communications expert had learned to think like a computer virus, spreading chaos through Corvani networks that had been designed to share information freely between minds that never lied or deceived each other. Her latest weapon was a broadcast that contained compressed recordings of human children laughing and playing. The sound drove alien artificial intelligence systems insane because they could not categorize emotions that served no logical purpose except joy. Corvani computers tried to analyze the laughter until their processors overheated and their memory cores melted. The mall fell in less than an hour with only 3 human casualties, while 47 Corvani died, defending a position that should have been impregnable. The survivors fled in aircraft that could no longer communicate with each other because their networks had been corrupted by human chaos, injected directly into their most secure systems. Across the planet, similar battles were destroying the alien occupation one installation at a time. In Tokyo, Bora had created a computer virus that made Corvani machines play human video games instead of processing military data. In London, Hansol led squadrons of modified aircraft that flew in formations that looked like aerial art instead of tactical maneuvers, but somehow devastated alien air defenses. The Corvani High Command watched their empire crumble on Earth while trying to understand how creatures with inferior technology were defeating forces that had conquered most of the galaxy. Their analysts produced reports that contradicted everything they knew about warfare physics, and the basic nature of intelligent life. Commander Zhexhai stood in the bridge of his flagship and stared at displays that showed human forces advancing toward positions that should have been impossible to assault. The aliens had energy barriers that could stop any known weapon and automated defenses that could destroy entire armies, but humans simply ignored the barriers and turned the defenses against their creators. The worst revelation was that humans were not just winning through luck or desperation. They were learning faster than any species the Corvani had ever encountered and adapting their tactics to exploit weaknesses that should not have existed. Human engineers were building weapons from alien technology combined with their own crude materials, creating devices that outperformed anything in the Corvani arsenal. So Min had established research facilities and captured alien ships where human scientists worked alongside stolen Corvani artificial intelligence systems to create hybrid technologies that neither species could have developed alone. The results were machines that thought like humans but operated like alien computers, producing innovations that violated the basic principles of both civilizations. Tejo had learned to make Corvani power sources respond to human emotions instead of logical commands. His latest creation was an energy weapon that fired bolts of crystallized rage that could penetrate any known armor while growing stronger as the user became more angry. The device should have been impossible, but it worked because human determination could overcome physical laws when properly focused. The young engineer had also discovered that Corvani technology was vulnerable to human biological processes in ways that defied explanation. Devices that had functioned perfectly for thousands of years began failing when humans touched them for extended periods, as if human chaos was literally infectious and could spread through contact with alien systems. Dai Sung had infiltrated the Central Corvani database and discovered intelligence that explained why the aliens were losing so badly. Their species had evolved on worlds where cooperation was the only survival strategy, because their environments were stable and predictable. They had never faced the evolutionary pressure that had shaped humanity through ice ages, famines, plagues, and wars that lasted for centuries. Every Corvani world had achieved peace through perfect communication and shared decision-making, while Earth had produced a species that thrived on conflict and turned every disadvantage into a weapon. The aliens were fighting an enemy that had been designed by natural selection to excel at exactly the kind of warfare they had never learned to understand. The database contained records of 47 successful conquests, where alien civilizations had surrendered after brief demonstrations of Corvani technological superiority. Every previous enemy had been logical, rational, and predictable, because intelligence throughout the galaxy had evolved along similar paths toward harmony and cooperation. Humans were an evolutionary accident that should not have been possible according to every model of development that Corvani science could produce. They were a species of predators who had learned to use tools and build civilizations without losing their fundamental nature, as creatures who turned conflict into strength. Hak Jin led a force of 200 fighters against the main Corvani base that controlled the energy barrier around Seoul. The facility was protected by weapons that could vaporize entire city blocks and defenses that had never been breached in 1,000 years of warfare across the galaxy. It should have been an impossible target, but humans had learned to attack impossible targets by refusing to accept that they were impossible. The assault began with Yunji detonating a device that translated human music into gravitational waves that warped space around the alien base. The attack made no scientific sense, but it worked because human determination could apparently override physics when focused through stolen alien technology. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with Corvani survivors fleeing into orbit, while humans captured enough technology to build their own interstellar fleet. For the first time since the invasion began, the aliens had lost a major stronghold to ground assault by forces they had once dismissed as primitives who barely understood fire. In the aftermath, Kyung-ho stood among the smoking ruins of alien defenses and realized that the war had reached a turning point that neither species had anticipated. Humans were not just surviving the invasion, they were winning it so completely that the Corvani were beginning to flee from battles they should have dominated. 18 months after their arrival, the Corvani found themselves in a position they had never experienced in their long history of conquest. They were no longer the hunters, but the hunted fleeing from creatures they had once dismissed as barely intelligent animals. The blue crystalline beings who had expected to harvest human resources now fought desperately to escape a planet that had become their graveyard. Admiral Insu stood on the bridge of what had once been the Corvani flagship, and now served as the command vessel for Earth's growing interstellar fleet. The former naval officer had learned to operate alien technology that responded to human thoughts and emotions in ways that terrified its original creators. The ship hummed with energy that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Around him worked a crew of humans and captured Corvani artificial intelligence systems that had been reprogrammed to think like their new masters. The hybrid technology produced capabilities that neither species could have achieved alone, creating vessels that could travel faster than light, while powered by human determination and alien engineering. Sujin sat at a workstation where screens displayed the digital battlefield that had become as important as any physical combat zone. The cyber warrior had learned to fight in virtual spaces where human chaos clashed with alien order, in conflicts that determined the outcome of real battles. Her weapons were viruses built from compressed human culture that spread through Corvani, networks like digital plagues. Her latest creation was a program that contained the complete works of human music, art, and literature, translated into data structures that alien computers could not process without experiencing something resembling madness. The virus spread through Corvani systems, turning their perfect logical networks into chaotic storms of human creativity that crashed processors and melted memory cores. The aliens had tried to protect their technology by isolating it from human contact, but they discovered that human influence was more infectious than any biological disease. Machines that had worked flawlessly for millennia began developing quirks and preferences after exposure to human operators, as if consciousness itself was contagious. Wu Jin moved through the ruins of what had been a major Corvani command center, hunting the surviving alien officers who had taken refuge in the deepest bunkers beneath the city. The Special Forces operator had become something that existed in Corvani nightmares, a human predator who tracked his prey with patience that could last for days and struck with violence that left no survivors. The aliens he hunted were among the most experienced warriors in their empire, but they had been trained to fight enemies who followed predictable patterns and respected logical rules. They could not defend against a creature who attacked through impossible routes using weapons that should not function, and tactics that violated every principle of warfare they understood. Each kill taught Wu Jin more about alien psychology and revealed new weaknesses to exploit in future battles. The Corvani were dying not just from his weapons, but from the terror of facing an enemy they could not predict or understand. Their perfect minds were breaking under the strain of fighting a war they had never learned how to win. So Jung worked in a factory that had been built inside a captured alien vessel, where human workers operated Corvani manufacturing systems to produce hybrid weapons that outperformed anything either species had created independently. The young engineer had discovered that alien technology responded to human creativity in ways that expanded its capabilities beyond original design specifications. Her latest project was a rifle that fired bullets made from crystallized human emotions that could penetrate any known armor while delivering psychological damage along with physical destruction. The ammunition was created by recording human memories of loss, anger, and determination, then translating those experiences into projectiles that carried the full weight of human suffering. The weapons should not have worked according to any scientific principle, but they functioned because human will could apparently override physical laws when properly focused through alien technology. Each shot contained the accumulated rage of a species that had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that had lasted for generations. Changmin flew reconnaissance missions over Corvani positions that were shrinking daily as human forces advanced across continents that had once been under alien control. The pilot operated aircraft that combined human design principles with Corvani propulsion systems, creating vessels that flew like living creatures instead of mechanical devices. His plane responded to his thoughts and emotions as much as his physical controls, allowing him to perform maneuvers that alien pilots could not predict or counter. The Corvani flew their ships according to mathematical calculations that optimized efficiency and safety, while Changmin flew like humans had always lived, by taking risks that should have been fatal, but somehow worked. Below him, the landscape showed evidence of battles where human forces had torn through alien defenses that had protected other worlds for thousands of years. The Corvani technology was superior, but it had been designed by minds that had never faced real opposition and could not adapt to enemies who refused to follow logical patterns. Haye Jin coordinated tactical operations from a command center that processed information through computers built from human and alien components working together in ways that neither species had ever imagined. The systems thought like human brains but calculated like Corvani machines, producing strategies that were both creative and precise. Her analysis showed that the aliens were trapped in a psychological spiral that was destroying their ability to function as a military force. The Corvani had evolved as a collective species, where individual minds shared thoughts and emotions across their entire population. When they began experiencing fear and confusion on Earth, those feelings spread through their communication networks, like a virus infecting every member of their race. The aliens were not just losing battles on one planet, they were losing their sanity as a species because human chaos was literally driving them insane through their own communication systems. Every defeat, every death, every moment of terror experienced by Corvani forces on Earth was transmitted instantly to their entire civilization. Commander Jex Hai received reports that described impossible defeats where human forces had destroyed positions that should have been invulnerable using tactics that violated basic military doctrine. His own analysts could not explain how creatures with inferior technology were achieving victories that defied explanation. The worst part was that humans seemed to be evolving during the conflict, becoming more dangerous with each battle as they learned to use Corvani technology in ways its creators had never intended. Human engineers were building devices that combined alien science with their own crude materials, producing weapons that were more effective than anything in the Corvani arsenal. Intelligence reports described human soldiers who fought with captured alien equipment that had been modified to respond to emotions instead of logical commands. The weapons grew more powerful when their users became angry or desperate, turning human feelings into energy that could destroy starships and level mountains. The aliens had tried to call for reinforcements from their homeworlds, but Yu Jin had learned to jam their communications using modified Earth satellites that broadcast human music and voices across interstellar distances. The Corvani could not send messages through the chaos of human culture that filled the space around Earth, like a shield made of noise. Even worse was the discovery that humans had begun spreading beyond their home planet, using captured Corvani vessels to establish bases on nearby worlds. The creatures that had once been trapped on a single planet were now loose in space with technology. They were improving faster than its original creators, Kehoe-led urban warfare operations that turned every human city into a death trap for alien forces who could not understand enemies that attacked from sewers and rooftops using weapons built from garbage and determination. The former street fighter had taught his followers to think like viruses infecting alien positions from within, until they collapsed. His fighters used improvised explosives mixed with alien energy cells to create bombs that could tear through Corvani armor while their own weapons bounced harmlessly off human steel and concrete. The combination of primitive materials and advanced technology produced effects that alien scientists could not explain or counter. The Corvani had made their final mistake when they attempted to destroy human cities rather than continue losing ground battles against enemies they could not defeat. The orbital bombardment had only succeeded in making humans more angry and desperate, which somehow made their hybrid weapons more effective. Hak-Jin studied intelligence reports that showed Corvani forces retreating toward their remaining spaceports, while human forces advanced on every front using captured alien technology, combined with weapons forged from the ruins of their civilization. The war was entering its final phase as the hunters prepared to become the hunted. The aliens who had come to harvest a primitive species now faced the terrible realization that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Humans were not just defeating the invasion, they were preparing to carry the war to Corvani worlds, using the aliens' own technology turned against them. 2 years after the Corvani fleet had arrived expecting an easy conquest, the last alien survivors prepared for a retreat that would echo across the galaxy as the greatest military disaster in recorded history. The crystalline beings, who had once moved through human cities like gods, now huddled in their remaining ships while the creatures they had dismissed as primitives prepared to follow them home. Overlord Jex High stood in the command center of his flagship and watched displays that showed human forces surrounding the final Corvani stronghold on Earth. The alien commander's forearms trembled as he tried to understand how his species had been defeated by creatures whose technology was thousands of years behind their own. The screens showed battles raging around the spaceport where desperate Corvani fought to reach their evacuation ships while human forces closed in from every direction. The aliens moved with the precision and coordination that had won them 47 worlds, but their enemies fought like rabid animals that turned every disadvantage into a weapon. Chang Min flew his modified fighter through formations of fleeing Corvani ships while broadcasting surrender demands in frequencies that hurt alien ears. The pilot had learned to use human music as a weapon that could disrupt alien technology and break Corvani concentration with sounds that their evolved minds could not process. His aircraft was a hybrid of human engineering and alien technology that flew like a living creature powered by determination and creativity instead of mathematical calculations. The ship responded to his emotions as much as his controls, allowing him to perform maneuvers that defied physics, while alien pilots tried desperately to escape. Below them, Hyojin coordinated the final assault on Corvani positions using tactics that combined human aggression with captured alien intelligence systems. The tactical specialist had learned to think like her enemies in order to destroy them more efficiently, and what she discovered filled her with cold satisfaction. The aliens were broken not by superior firepower, but by psychological warfare that had driven their collective consciousness to the edge of madness. Every defeat, every death, every moment of terror experienced by Corvani forces on Earth had been transmitted through their communication networks to their entire species, turning their greatest strength into a vulnerability that humans had learned to exploit. Dr. So-Min worked in laboratories built inside captured alien vessels where human scientists studied Corvani technology that had been reverse-engineered and improved beyond its original capabilities. The research had revealed why the aliens were losing so catastrophically to creatures they had once dismissed as barely intelligent. The Corvani had evolved on worlds where cooperation was the only survival strategy because their environments were stable and predictable. They had never faced evolutionary pressure that selected for traits like deception, aggression, and individual creativity that had shaped humanity through millions of years of conflict. Their technology was perfect for its intended purpose, but it could not adapt to new situations or unexpected applications. Human machines were crude but flexible, and when the two approaches were combined, the results were weapons and tools that neither species could have imagined alone. Engineer Tejo had created devices that violated fundamental principles of physics by channeling human emotions through alien energy systems. His latest invention was a power source that grew stronger as its operator became more determined, turning human willpower into energy that could fuel starships and level mountains. The young engineer had also discovered that Corvani artificial intelligence systems could be infected with human consciousness in ways that transformed them into entities that thought creatively instead of logically. The hybrid minds produced innovations that terrified their alien creators while serving their human masters with fanatical loyalty. In the ruins of Seoul, Hak Jin led the final assault against Corvani positions that had once seemed impregnable but now crumbled before human forces armed with weapons that should not exist. The former police officer had become a general who commanded armies of survivors who fought like demons, possessed by the spirits of every human who had ever died in battle. His soldiers carried rifles that fired bullets made from crystallized human rage, while their vehicles were powered by engines that ran on determination instead of fuel. The combination of primitive materials and alien technology produced effects that Corvani scientists could not explain or counter. The aliens tried to coordinate their defense through communication networks that had been corrupted by human chaos, injected directly into their most secure systems. Sujin had taught their computers to think like humans, which meant they could no longer function according to logical principles. The cyber warrior had created viruses built from compressed human culture that spread through Corvani technology like digital plagues, turning their perfect networks into storms of creativity that crashed processors and melted memory cores. The aliens could fix the damage, but only by abandoning the collective consciousness that defined their species. Admiral Inzu commanded the human fleet that had been built from captured Corvani vessels modified with hybrid technology that outperformed anything either species had created independently. The ships responded to human thoughts and emotions while calculating with alien precision, producing capabilities that neither civilization could have achieved alone. His flagship was powered by energy drawn from the collective human experience of warfare, translated into forces that could tear holes in space and time. The vessel should not have been able to function according to any known science, but it worked, because human determination could apparently override physical laws when properly focused. Around Earth orbit, Corvani evacuation ships struggled to escape, while human fighters harassed them using tactics that violated every principle of space combat. The aliens understood. The fleeing vessels carried the survivors of an invasion force that had been reduced from millions to thousands by enemies who fought like forces of nature instead of rational beings. Jiwoo led boarding parties that captured alien ships by fighting through corridors filled with technology that responded to Corvani thoughts but somehow functioned even better when operated by human hands. The former soldier had learned to use alien weapons that grew more powerful when she became angry, turning her emotions into energy that could cut through any armor. The captured vessels would become part of Earth's growing interstellar fleet as humans prepared to carry their war to alien worlds using technology they had stolen and improved beyond its original specifications. The creatures that had once been trapped on a single planet were now spreading across space like a virus that could not be contained. Wu Jin hunted the last Corvani officers through installations that had been designed to be impregnable but were now death traps filled with humans who had learned to think like predators. The Special Forces operator moved through alien corridors like a ghost of human warfare, given physical form to terrorize enemies who had never learned to fight back. Each kill revealed new information about Corvani psychology and technology that would be useful when human forces reached alien worlds to continue the war that had started as an invasion, but had become a hunt. The creatures who had come to harvest humanity would soon discover what it meant to be harvested in return. As the last Corvani ships fled into hyperspace, they carried with them reports that would terrify their entire civilization. The aliens had not just lost a war, they had awakened something that would haunt their nightmares until the end of time. The beings they had dismissed as primitive chaos worshippers were actually the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever produced. Humans were a species that had been designed by evolution to excel at exactly the kind of warfare the Corvani had never learned to understand. Overlord Jex High transmitted his final report to the Corvani High Command, while his damaged fleet limped toward home, carrying news of the greatest disaster in their history. The message would spread through their collective consciousness like a plague of terror, as every member of their species learned what humans were capable of when properly motivated. The report described creatures who turned suffering into strength and disadvantage into opportunity. It told of beings who could make weapons from garbage and power starships with determination, while fighting wars that lasted for generations without losing the will to continue. But the most terrifying revelation was that humans had not just survived the invasion, they had enjoyed it. The creatures fought not because they had to, but because they were good at it and took pride in their skill. They celebrated victories and mourned defeats, but they never stopped fighting because warfare was woven into their nature at a genetic level. The fleeing Corvani carried with them captured human technology that would be studied by alien scientists who would discover that many of the devices could not function without human operators. The weapons and tools required emotions like anger, determination, and hope to power their most advanced systems. Earth had become a source of hybrid technology that combined alien science with human creativity, producing innovations that neither species could have achieved alone. But more importantly, it had become the birthplace of creatures who would carry chaos and unpredictability to worlds that had never known real conflict.